There's been a lot of pitfalls I've fallen into while trying to write a book. And if you're trying to write a book too, you probably should avoid these. I want to tell you a story of warning for 3 things to avoid when writing your book. With any amount of luck, this might be able to help you stay out of writing ruts when creating your first novel. I'm Jessica, and I'm a writer and illustrator. Today I'll be drawing one of my characters from my current work-in-progress books, while I talk about the 3 themes I learned this week that authors should definitely never do. I encourage you to like and subscribe if you want more story-driven content like this one, and now let's get started! Number 1. Show your work in progress to people before the story is written. At first, this might seem a bit controversial to some people. What about editing? Developmental editing? Shouldn't you get opinions on the story and how it's going so far? Well, yes and no. Yes, it's good to show people your story to gauge how they react to it, if the storyline makes sense to them, and if you've made any mistakes along the way. Developmental editing is what makes good stories become great stories, in my opinion. However, you've gotta finish the story first. I'm talking about finishing your first draft before you start giving it to people. Make sure you know the story first and have it edited to your liking before handing it off to someone else for their second opinion. Once you have edited your first draft yourself onto your second draft, that's when you should get people's opinions on it, especially if you're considering publishing it. Believe me when I say, giving people bits and pieces of your first draft could make you despise your writing. The person reading your novel won't have the full thing and could pass judgments on your story before you've even gotten to the good parts that you're super excited to write. It can kill your creative flow, as they might offer suggestions that might make the story more enjoyable to them, but less enjoyable for you to write. The important part of a first draft is to get the entire story written down. And then, with the first round of editing, you should seriously look at your story, deciding what works for you and what doesn't. Make a story you love first. Then you can worry about making other people love it as well. Actually, you know what? Hey, editing me? Stop the drawing process video right now. In fact, reverse a bit. And there. Think of writing like drawing a picture. They both have a process to get from nothing to something. A first draft of writing is like the guidelines of a drawing. You know somewhat of what you want the piece to look like, but the sketch is messy, your notes are all over the place, and it doesn't look like anything too good in the moment. Now imagine I showed someone this stage of the drawing. What do you think they'd say? Probably, "Well, that looks alright," if they're being nice. The real ones would say, "Good start, keep going." But if you showed this to get critiques on, others might say, "What a piece of unfinished garbage you have there." That's mean, sure, but they're not wrong. The drawing isn't done yet, so why would I show anyone this and then ask them, "Tell me, what do you think of it?" Your first draft is like these construction lines, unfinished. It would be crazy to give someone this and ask their opinion on it, because most of what you're envisioning is not even on the page yet. Give yourself a little time before you go asking for people's opinions. At least get a second pass sketch out before showing people and asking for critiques. It can be a lifesaver for your creative work, and really any kind of art, but especially for writing. The only caveat for this is if you're in the early stages of development, or if you've hit a brick wall of writer's block and don't know where to take the story. Basically, the brainstorming stages. People can be very helpful in getting you out of creative ruts if you don't know exactly where your story is going. But otherwise, Don't show people your unedited first draft. Get a story you like down, and then ask people to help you refine it even more. 2. Copy someone else's writing process. Just like snowflakes, thumbprints, and stars in the sky, every writer is unique. Cheesy, but true. As such, every single writer will have a different process for writing. Some writers are morning people and write early in the morning. Some writers are night owls and write long into the night. Some writers are neither and do their best work in the middle of the day. There are so many aspects of a writer's life that need to be accounted for while figuring out a writing process. Are they full-time writers, or do they have a day job? Do they have 5 hours to write, or can they only manage 30 minutes a day? What are their responsibilities that can't be ignored? Do they have a set schedule, or is every day different? With so many different life situations, it seems silly to want to copy a famous writer's writing process from day to day. And I'm not even talking about those videos on YouTube that are titled, "I tried Neil Gaiman's writing process for a week," though they are technically included in this. I'm talking about writing goals and writing milestones that, when you compare them to other writers, they may seem minuscule. For example, while going to college, I had it in mind that I would write about 1,000 words a day on my novel. Come rain or shine, homework or social activities, I would be able to meet that goal. Or so I thought. Often, I didn't make that goal. And I was so busy trying to survive college that I did not write a single word of the novel I'm working on right now. That was depressing. I saw other writers online that were making it to 2,000 words or even 5,000 words a day while still in college and posting videos about it in addition to their college classes. But I wasn't able to get anything down on the page besides my essays and assignments for class. But that's unfair to myself. I have ADHD, and it's hard to pay attention in class, so I had to work extra hard to make sure I would pass my classes. I was also living on my own and learning how to cook and clean and take care of myself, all stresses that took time away from writing to learn and master over my years in college. I was also spending time with friends, and I don't care how many times I've heard of the sad, lonely writer genius that makes one fantastic book trope. You need to get out of your head and off the paper and go live life to be a great writer. For the people I was watching on YouTube that were able to make those huge numbers, that worked for them. What worked for me was making my creative writing part of my homework assignments, so that way I could technically practice my writing while also getting through school. I may not have had any progress on my novel, but I was making progress as a writer in general. And for me, that's all I could do. So it was enough. Even now that I'm out of college and have a pretty good writing process and habit down, I'm constantly tweaking it and making changes to it so that it can better fit my lifestyle and how I creatively work. The only caveat to this tip is to experiment. A lot of my writing process I've learned from hearing about something in someone else's process, then trying that out for a while. I tried that with a writing journal, but then I realized I don't like recording the number of words I wrote each day to look back on. However, I did like the idea of setting a word goal for myself each day, then trying my best to reach that goal, as told to me by someone else. I also liked working in the middle of the day as opposed to working in the mornings before my day job or at night after my day job. I'm just lucky enough that I have a day job that allows me to write during it. Another thing to consider while trying to structure out your best times for writing. So, for your writing process, don't just copy other people's processes for writing. It might not work for you where you're at. Instead, Frankenstein it. See what works and what doesn't work for you, and change it if it doesn't. There is no one way to write. So long as your process keeps you writing, it'll be good, even if you can only get 50 words a day out at a time. 3. Publish your book without getting it edited. This one seems like a no-brainer. Of course you should get your book edited before publishing it, even when self-publishing it. But you would be surprised from what I've seen, or maybe not. After all, there are plenty of indie books on Amazon where you can tell the author just did not do any editing. And I can point that out myself because I am going indie with my books as well. I need to tell you a tragic story of a person who gave me their manuscript to read, then published it without editing it. I'm not going to put them or their work on blast or anything, but it was a terrible thing that happened. My friend's cousin is a writer, and my friend told me that they were looking for beta readers to read their story. I wanted to try my hand at being a beta reader, so I volunteered. For those not in the know, beta readers are people who read a work of fiction before it's published in order to mark errors and give honest reactions about the novel, typically not receiving payment for their work. It's actually kind of fun to be a beta reader when the author uses beta readers correctly. This was not one of those times. The author was worried about giving out their actual manuscript to the beta readers, so they sent us an earlier copy of the book, asking us to look at the developmental aspect of their story rather than grammar errors. That was a mistake because, oh boy, the grammar errors made it hard to read. Still, I was a beta reader, so hopefully they'd be able to take what comments we gave them, and they'd be able to apply it to their most recent draft. Still not a good idea to give an earlier draft to a bunch of beta readers who will be suggesting changes based on that earlier draft, but I digressed. Well, the first chapters were terrible. I didn't really know what was going on. I couldn't read it much at all, so I wrote down my notes and tried to continue on. Then I got a text from my friend, not the author, but my friend, the author's cousin. She said that the author was going to publish the book on the date that originally our notes were due, and instead of giving them back our notes on the book, we were to put in reviews for the book on Amazon in the first hour that it was live. Excuse me. What? They're giving me an earlier draft, fraught with terrible grammar and a rather terrible opening to the book, and they're asking me to make a judgment about that book based on that alone? I texted my friend back frantically, explaining that they should not do that. First of all, that's not what beta readers are for. And secondly, their novel was not ready for publication. It just wasn't. It needed so much more work, even in the developmental stages of editing. If this was how their first novel was going to go, they were in trouble of having the common problem of having a terrible debut novel. We had to tell them to reconsider the publication date. However, my friend wasn't really close with her cousin, so she didn't have much sway over them. So, I was emailed by the author at an email address that wouldn't return my messages, leading me to the listing on Amazon. And I left a review. I did as she asked and made it as honest as I could while also trying to be sensitive. I gave it 3 stars, but it was a train wreck. I think they must have fixed it afterward because now people have been leaving 5-star reviews on it, but yeah, it was awful when it first got published. I felt so bad, I deleted my review off the book. So please, edit your writing before getting it published. You may not be able to go back like this author did. That was so lucky that she was able to bounce back. For the 4th bonus tip, take all writing advice. What's this? A bonus 4th tip? This is for all you lucky people who make it to the end of this video. Thanks so much for staying with me this long. This tip kind of seems backwards at first, but I'll direct you back to what I said about writing processes. Every reader is different, which means every bit of writing advice may work for you or it may not. The tips I have in this video work for me, but there's always exceptions to the rules when it comes to writing. Don't believe me? Well, would you believe a certain small author named Brandon Sanderson? He's just a small, no-named author who's hit the bestsellers list a few times in fantasy. I'm sure you've never heard of him. But he does teach a lecture at BYU in Provo, Utah, and he had this to say about taking all kinds of writing advice. Writing is hard to teach, because you will learn more than I can teach you in this class by writing your first book, than myself or any other person can possibly teach you. Writing is an art that requires work and effort. Everything requires work and effort, but the thing about a lot of artistic pursuits like this is you need to start exploring with your style, seeing how it goes, trying new things, revising, trying different things. And as you explore writing, you will get better and better, and you will know how to use the tools that people like myself give you. You will also know which tools to ignore. Because one of the key philosophies I have is writing advice is only as good as its ability to help you individually. You will get bad advice for you. You will get bad advice for you from me in this class. I try hard not to give you too much of that, but the thing is, writing is so individual. What works for some writers doesn't work for others. That was a long quote, and he has so much more to say about the topic, so I will link to his lecture in the description down below, though many of you have probably already seen it. So, though all I've talked about today might apply to you, especially the editing thing, please, goodness, try out the editing thing before you publish your book, so help me. I would encourage you to experiment and figure out for yourself before you take my word for it. Maybe you like showing people your first draft before the entire story is written out because it makes you excited to write more of the story. Maybe you enjoy trying out other people's writing processes and have the free time and capability to do so. Maybe you've already edited your work into the ground and don't need any more edits for your book before going to publishing. The decision to take or leave my advice is really up to you, and same goes to whomever else gives you advice about your work. It's your work and your art at the very core of it all. And that's what I learned this week in my writing journey. Thanks so much for listening to it all. Please be sure to like the video if you liked this kind of content, and also subscribe for more story-based videos like this one. I'm also going to update you on my current work. It's going great! I've somehow managed to get the pressure off of just writing and getting through the first draft. and have surpassed 90,000 words so far. However, I'm only in the middle of my story. Send help, please. But that's enough about me. What are you writing? What's your elevator pitch for your story, poem, or novel? Comment it down below. I'd love to hear about it. You're a real one for staying till the end. Thanks so much, and I'll see you later.